One of the most bizarre allegations posted by an Islamophobe on his website is that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was a megalomaniac. This is really absurd because the Prophet is known for his extreme modesty. To prove his allegations, this man decided to use certain incidents from our religion. He used as evidence two sayings of the Prophet that had been narrated by Anas, a well-known companion of the Prophet, who narrated many of his traditions. The first one says, "None of you is a true believer until I am more beloved to him than his children, his parents, and everyone else." So this man's argument was that it wasn't normal for someone to demand love or to order people to love him. The man also cited another saying by Umar ibn al-Khattab, who was also a close companion of the Prophet. Umar said to the Prophet, "Indeed, you are more beloved to me than everything, except my own self." So the Prophet replied, "None of you is a true believer until I am more beloved to him than himself." Umar then replied, "In the name of who revealed the Quran to you, you are indeed more beloved to me than my own self." So the Prophet replied, "Now it is so, Umar." It is really a bit confusing. Umar first says that he loves him more than anybody else except himself. And he is being quite honest with himself here. Next, the Prophet tells him that nobody's faith is complete until he loves him more than his own self. So Umar promptly replies that he does love him more than he loves himself. The Prophet then tells him that only now is his faith complete. What was really going on? Before we discuss this whole issue, we must ask ourselves, is it possible that the Prophet really was a megalomaniac? To start with, a person who suffers from megalomania never praises his peers. Who are the peers of the Prophet? His peers are the other prophets and the other messengers of God. And what do we find here? A man goes to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and asks him, "Who is the most noble of all people?" The Prophet didn't say, "It is me." He said, "It is my brother Joseph. He is the noble son of the noble, son of the noble, the son of the noble." Why is that so? Because Joseph is the son of a prophet, Jacob, who is also the son of another prophet, Isaac, who is also a son of the prophet, Abraham. That is why he said that Joseph was the most noble, being a prophet and the son, grandson, and great-grandson of prophets, a fourth generation of consecutive prophets. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also says about Jesus, son of Mary, "I am the closest to Jesus, son of Mary, in this world and in the hereafter." So they asked him, "How is that so?" He said, "All the prophets are brothers from high above. They have different mothers, but their religion is the same. And there were no prophets between me and Jesus. And since all the prophets are brothers, then I am the closest brother to him." The one religion that the Prophet talks about here is the religion of Islam, which God revealed through Prophet Muhammad, through Prophet Jesus, and through Prophet Moses. So he was equating himself with his peers, the other prophets. This is not the manner of someone suffering from megalomania. Besides, there are numerous incidents which show the extreme modesty of the messenger of God, peace be upon him. We all know that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had a non-Muslim neighbor who used to throw trash in front of the Prophet's door every day. One day, the Prophet stepped outside his home but did not find any trash. So he assumed that the neighbor must be sick, and he decided to visit him. When he went to him, the non-Muslim asked him how he knew that he was sick. The Prophet smiled and said, "Because you broke your daily habit of delivering certain goods to us." So the non-Muslim was so moved. He cried and then said, "I believe there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his prophet," thereby becoming a Muslim. Look at the decency and conduct of the Prophet. If any one of us came out of his home each day to find that his neighbor had thrown his tied up trash bag in front of his doorstep, he would be furious and an argument or even a fight might ensue. But the Prophet was extremely patient. He would calmly remove the trash from his doorstep every day, and when one day he found no trash, His first thought was to worry that the neighbor may be sick. Such magnificent behavior. How can a man like that be accused of being megalomaniac or of being conceited? Every one of us, if in this situation, would think to themselves, who do they think they are to throw trash on my doorstep? Yet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, despite being a prophet of God, never asked this question. That is the antithesis of megalomania. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had a habit of gathering his wives after the afternoon prayers, which are the Asr prayers, in order to have a snack together, and he would joke with them and tell them riddles. He would even playfully take turns asking his wives, suppose you were not married to me, and someone asked to marry you, promised you so much as a dowry, and promised to give you presents. Would you marry him? She would play along and laugh, and they would all have a good laugh together and enjoy their time. This is not the conduct of a megalomaniac or a conceited person, particularly during a period of time in history when all over the world women were considered to be lower than men. This is the conduct of a very modest, down-to-earth man, a man who sat every day with his women and spoke with them lightheartedly. A megalomaniac at that time certainly would have not allowed the female members of his family to speak with him as equal, nor would he have joked and played with them. Adi was the son of Hatim al-Ta'i, the latter being known throughout Arabia for his extreme generosity and for being one of its most highly regarded men. Adi came to Medina one day when he had not yet become a Muslim. When the Prophet saw him coming, he took off his cloak for him to sit on as a sign of veneration and said, honorable people must be treated with the respect they are due. It is evident from the documented traditions of the Prophet that whenever anyone came to Medina and saw the Prophet sitting with his companions and he did not happen to know what the Prophet looked like, he wouldn't be able to pick him out from the rest. That is because he would be sitting on the floor in their midst, just like one of them. So when an envoy was sent, for example, from the Romans or other kingdoms, they would come into Medina to find the Prophet sitting modestly among his companions, not on a special chair or throne, not dressed in expensive or elaborate clothing. His house was very modest too, just like all the other houses. There was no palace called the Prophet's palace. One day, Umar ibn al-Khattab went to the Prophet's home and found him sleeping on a straw mat that was so rough it had made marks on his body. So Umar was moved and said, why don't you let us bring you something more comfortable to sleep on? So the Prophet replied, oh Umar, what do I care about this world anyway? To me, it is as if I was a traveler on a hot summer's day. The traveler found a tree, so he rested under the shade of the tree for a while, then went on his way. When the Prophet took over Mecca, it was a great conquest. Mecca was considered the capital of the Arabian Peninsula at that time, and he had conquered it. Soon after, while he was in his tent, a man came in to talk to him, and the Prophet noticed that he was shaking visibly as he stood in front of him. So he said to him, calm down. I am not a king. I am the son of a woman from Quraysh who used to eat dried morsels of food. Meaning that he was a very ordinary man, the son of an ordinary woman who used to eat very plain food. Let us observe how he entered Mecca after conquering it. As I said, this was a great conquest, a grand victory. But as he entered it, his head was bowed as he sat on his camel. He was in effect prostrating himself to God as he rode on his camel. He looked more like he had been conquered, not like a victorious leader. Why did he make a point of doing that? Because he intended to conquer himself, his ego, and any pride that may have been inside him. And here is another example. He said, don't revere me like the Christians did to Jesus, son of Mary. Meaning, do not worship me, for I am a servant. So call me God's servant and his prophet. Always call me a servant, so that you can always remember that I am but a servant, and so that I can always remember my place. One day the Prophet, peace be upon him, sat down to eat. As he sat, his head was bowed so low, he was practically prostrating as he sat on the floor eating. So his wife Aisha said, don't be so hard on yourself. Why don't you sit comfortably or lean on something as you eat? He answered, but I am a servant, so I must sit like a servant and eat like a servant. Who am I? I am nothing. Can you imagine the Prophet, peace be upon him, who is the greatest of all mankind, talking about himself like that, with such modesty? Lady Aisha recounts that he used to actually serve his household. It is commonplace these days all over the world that in most households the wife serves her husband and children. But the Prophet of Islam used to serve his family. Aisha says he used to clean the house and mend his own clothes. If a megalomaniac man loses a button of his shirt, he will tell his wife to sew it on, but not him. He used to sweep the floors in his house, mend his own clothes and shoes, and clean them as well. Now, let us go back to the story I was recounting at the beginning, when Umar ibn al-Khattab said that he loved the Prophet more than anything except himself. But the Prophet told him that he must love him even more than he loves himself in order to be a true believer. Umar had then immediately answered that he was indeed more dear to him than his own self. Then the Prophet said, now that's it, meaning now you are a true believer. To understand this story, people should be fair. An unfair person typically gives more worth to certain things or people than what they deserve. For example, a man may love his wife more than any other woman, despite the fact that his wife is not the best woman or wife in the world. So why is she the one who is deserving of his love? Yet despite this, a man must love his relations, such as his children, more than any other children in the world. Are they the most perfect children on earth? Of course not. But because of the special relationship between them, he loves them more than any other children. Similarly, a person loves his parents more than any other parents, although they may not be the best parents, but simply because of that special relationship that exists between them. Well, doesn't that make people unjust? Logically, truly fair and just people should direct their love at those who are the best among people. Therefore, when a man loves one woman more than any other, it should be the most wonderful woman, not his own wife. The child he loves the most should be the best child, not his own children, simply because they are his children. And he should give the most love to the most perfect parents on earth, not his own parents. But if things were this way, life would just not be pleasant and would be unbalanced. Each person must love the people in his life and love himself too, more than he loves others, though others may be better people. So in order to avoid being unjust and in order to truly appreciate the good qualities and characteristics that Islam encourages in us, the solution is that a Muslim should love above all else the human being who possesses all of these qualities. So to truly appreciate justice, one must love the person who is the most just. And in order to truly appreciate honesty, one should love the one who is the most honest, and so on. All human perfection is embodied in Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was the most generous, just, loving, honest, and merciful human being.